the number 10 shirt, Spartak Moscow's top scorer, 50 caps for the Dutch national team, and now a man being arrested at an airport. Dubai International, March 2024, black hoodie, sunglasses, passport in hand. Quincy Promes walks like a player heading home after international duty, calm, focused, maybe even bored. Gate 34 was steps away. One more flight, one more goal waiting back in Moscow. But two men were already watching. Plainclothes, precise. They didn't raise their voices, just moved in. One reached for his arm. For everyone else, it was just another boarding gate. For Promes, it was the end of the illusion, because behind the goals, behind the celebrations, behind the diamond-studded logo that read Mask QP, was something darker. A stabbing in a backyard, encrypted messages about containers, 1,360 kilos of coke, 2 convictions, and now, finally, a stop he couldn't outrun. For years, he had played through it all, scored through it all, smiled through it all. But on that airport floor, the game was over. And what the football world still hadn't understood was that Quincy Promes had been playing 2 matches the entire time. To know how it ended here, you have to go back to the beginning, to Osdorp, a neighbourhood in the Netherlands, to a boy with talent, with fire, and the mask that would one day define him. Quincy Promes was born on January 4th, 1992, Surinamese blood, Dutch soil. His father had played professionally in Suriname, then continued at amateur level in the Netherlands. Football was already in the blood, in a neighbourhood where talent was currency, but only if it came with grit. He later said, you had to fight for your place. And he meant that, literally, every pitch was a battleground, every pass earned. By 12, he had fought his way into the Ajax Youth Academy, the crown jewel of Dutch football, and just as quickly, he threw it away. Too many fights, too much ego, too many nights chasing something louder than the whistle. By 16, Ajax released him. Bad behaviour, both on and off the pitch, he admitted later. He was falling into something. No one was calling it crime yet, but it was waiting. He nearly walked away from the game altogether. What pulled him back? His mother. No stadium lights, no tactics board. Just her, reminding him who he was supposed to be. That was enough. HFC Haarlem. Then FC Twente. Quiet clubs. Second chances. In 2011, he signed his first professional contract. A year later, he was making his Eredivisie debut. By 2013, he had grown sharper, faster, angrier, maybe. A loan spell at Go Ahead Eagles turned into a breakout season. Scouts started circling. Not just Dutch, Russian. In 2014, he signed with Spartak Moscow. That changed everything. Some say he disappeared into Russia, but on the pitch, he exploded. Between 2014 and 2018, Promes racked up 66 goals and 34 assists in 135 games. Spartak had not won a league title in 16 years, until he showed up. In 2017, when they lifted the Russian Premier League trophy, he was named Footballer of the Year. Then came the Oranje, the national football team of the Netherlands. In 2014, he earned his first senior cap. Between then and 2021, he played 50 times for his country, scoring 7 goals. His crowning moment, June 2019, a goal against England, a 3-1 win, Nations League final secured. One Dutch newspaper ran the headline, Quincy Promes, from ball boy to top scorer. By 2018, Sevilla paid €21 million to bring him to La Liga. He struggled. It didn't feel like home, but in 2019, Ajax brought him back. That season, he scored 19 goals in 28 games. He was on posters, in headlines. His name floated in Premier League gossip, Liverpool, Manchester United. By 2020, Promes was back at Ajax and in the form of his life. A player once cast out was now the club's top scorer. But what if that was not redemption? What if that was just a mask? Because while everyone else was watching his footwork, they missed what was happening off the pitch. But when you trace back far enough, there is always a moment, one that felt small at the time, where something shifted. In Promes' case, it came long before the airport, long before the knife. Even when he was dazzling for Ajax, questions were already circling. 2 plainclothes officers, Arno van Leeuwen, Bob Shagan, no strangers to the neighbourhoods that raised players like Promes. They had seen it before, the talent, the hunger, and the pull from the other side. In the late 2010s, they launched a quiet initiative, a warning system, conversations with young footballers on the edge before someone else reached them first. Promes was exactly the kind of profile they worried about. In 2019, his name came up, not from a match report, from a traffic stop. He had been sitting in the passenger seat. The man behind the wheel was already flagged, a known figure with ties to the underworld. The moment went unnoticed by the public, but not by them. The officers arranged a meeting at Ajax's headquarters. They kept it informal, a friendly warning. They told Promes they liked him, told him to be careful. Not everyone from the old neighbourhood had stayed clean. Promes listened, polite, said all the right things, admitted he had only a few real friends, but also told them he could not just cut people off. And months later, they found him in the same car, same driver, same story. This time, the officers were more direct. Had he not understood what they were trying to say? Promes didn't flinch. "These are people I have known my whole life," he told them. "I cannot just abandon them." But by that point, he had already stepped past proximity. He was no longer just around the edge of something. He was inside it. Behind the curtain, a second Quincy was taking shape. On the pitch, he celebrated goals with a masked hand over his face. Off it, that mask became a symbol. Mask QP, a diamond-studded logo on his clothing line. But it was more than fashion. In his free time, Promes was making music, rap tracks, gritty, postured, and dangerously close to real. The lyrics danced around guns, violence, narcotics. One song, Wicked Man, included a line investigators would later underline. All those containers, like a present, must be unwrapped. To many, it sounded like a rich footballer cosplaying the streets, an image, a noise. But some of the men in those music videos were not playing roles. They were later convicted of deadly assassinations, kidnapping. Investigators started looking closer. He wore the number 10 and the mask. One for the fans, the other a signal. By day, a star for club and country. By night, the messages, the money, the men who didn't play games. The deeper he went into football, the harder it became to leave the rest behind. One life made him a star. The other made him a target. In April 2018, police intelligence found that Quincy Promes had allegedly invested $200,000 into a narcotics deal. 2 years later, in 2020, Dutch authorities launched a covert probe into his activities. The operation had a name, Porto. They watched, listened, waited. Promes and his associates were using an encrypted service. Sky ECC, untouchable, or so they thought. Then Belgian police cracked it. Suddenly, years of messages became readable, a goldmine of evidence, and right there, Promes. In early 2020, while still playing for Ajax, Promes allegedly used a burner phone to help coordinate the import of a major narcotics shipment into Europe. The messages were blunt. "My boys are on their way to Antwerp," he texted. He referred to his workers as soldiers, paid intermediaries, directed logistics. The cargo? 2,850 pounds, 1,290 kilograms, concealed in a container of salt, shipped straight from Latin America. Other traffickers were stunned. One messaged another, "Is he definitely that footballer?" Wiretaps captured it all. In July 2020, during one call, a friend asked, "Do you make more money playing football or doing business?" Promes replied, "Doing business." To the outside world, he was scoring for Ajax, but to the network behind the scenes, he was something else entirely. He played a central role in the operation. In encrypted chats, he discussed putting up €75,000 toward the deal, gave instructions, set the moves in place. Later, prosecutors would define it clearly, a directing and coordinating role, not a follower, a ringleader, and still, on weekends, he pulled on his kit, laced up his boots, and walked out under the lights. But every rise carries its shadow, and his caught up fast. By mid-2020, Promes looked untouchable. Ajax's golden boy, back in the headlines for all the right reasons. But under the surface, something was cracking. One argument, no police reports, no statements, but something happened. The cousin was rushed to the hospital, stabbed in the knee. Months of recovery followed, but no one would say much. Witnesses later told prosecutors it was Quincy, that he had been making stabbing movements. The motive? Possibly a missing piece of jewellery Promes believed his cousin knew more about. It might have stayed that way, quiet, buried under family shame. If not for one thing, Promes was already being watched, and his phone was already being tapped. While listening in on an entirely different case, investigators heard a call between Quincy and his father. His words, "Lucky I no longer carry a firearm, because otherwise it would have ended even uglier." In another call, the tone got darker. "Next time he will get bullets." That was all they needed. The cousin asked for €30,000 to settle the matter quietly. When that failed, prosecutors filed charges: attempted manslaughter, aggravated assault. Promes was still playing for Ajax, so authorities waited. In December 2020, after the final Champions League group match, he was arrested. Ajax stood by him. Erik ten Hag said Promes denied everything, and the club repeated one line: innocent until proven guilty. But the noise was building. 2 months later, Ajax agreed to sell him back to Spartak Moscow. €8.5 million. No ceremony, no farewell. Just gone. Prosecutors filed charges right after the transfer. The Dutch team never called him again. After Euro 2020, his name was gone. In Russia, he kept scoring, but off the pitch he was missing court dates, and pressure was building. March 2023, his trial opened in Amsterdam. He stayed in Moscow. His lawyer claimed he had contractual obligations. Prosecutors laid it out. Multiple witnesses, phone taps, a wound that could have ended a life if it had landed just inches differently. At the start of the trial, prosecutors pushed for a 2-year sentence. They pointed to the brutal damage to the cousin's knee, called Promes' actions reckless, violent. In June 2023, the Amsterdam District Court delivered its verdict. In absentia, Promes was found guilty of aggravated assault for the stabbing of his cousin. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison, slightly more than the typical 1-year sentence for such an offence. But the judge made it clear this wasn't just about violence. It was about had done it, a professional athlete, a public figure, a man who should have known better. Still, Promes stayed in Russia, filed an appeal, refused to return. By that summer, Promes was officially a convicted violent offender, playing weekly football in Moscow, a fugitive in boots. But this stabbing, this backyard outburst, was not an isolated moment. The stabbing drew headlines, but what did it set in motion? Because at the time, Dutch authorities weren't tapping his phone for assault. They were listening for something bigger. And in May 2023, it surfaced. Prosecutors named him in one of the largest narcotics cases ever linked to a European footballer. According to the Dutch Public Prosecution Service, Promes was directly involved in 2 massive shipments of narcotics. Both entered Europe through the port of Antwerp in 2020. Together, they weighed nearly 1,360 kilograms, a street value in the tens of millions of euros. The method, as old as it was effective, hidden inside containers filled with salt, the kind of cargo customs wouldn't blink at, the kind of cover that had worked before. Not this time. One of those containers was flagged, inspected, opened, and what Belgian customs found inside would lead investigators straight into a world of encrypted messages, dark port deals, and a name no one expected to see: Quincy Promes. The evidence did not rely on whispers or speculation. Authorities had cracked Sky ECC, an encrypted messaging service once believed to be untouchable. Inside those chats, Promes wasn't mentioned. He was organising, instructing, reacting, not from a distance, from inside. And he wasn't acting alone. Investigators found he was working with a well-known Dutch Surinamese trafficker, Piet Wortel, a man with a long history of transnational narcotic smuggling. But perhaps more surprising was the identity of Promes' co-defendant, Marilio V, his uncle, only 6 months older. In the chats they spoke like managers. Soldiers was the word they used for the men handling the physical loads. When one of the containers was intercepted by Belgian authorities, Promes sent a frustrated message, laced with slang. Me whole profit was by half. His cut, sliced open by customs. Promes reportedly paid €250,000 to Piet Wortel after a 400-kilo shipment was lost. That kind of money points to direct involvement. Prosecutors described it as a full-scale operation, not a side hustle, a fully structured chain, moving narcotics from Brazil to Belgium, then into the Netherlands. Antwerp was the entry point. The rest was logistics. In one encrypted message, Promes even suggested being physically present during the division of the narcotics. He wrote, "I suggest we measure tomorrow afternoon." Dutch prosecutors described it as a large organisation, and Promes squarely at the centre. 2 separate loads were detailed, one approximately 650 kilograms, the other 712. Together, 1.36 tonnes. One batch slipped through, the other was confiscated. Still, enough got through to make serious money, and Promes was making sure he got his share. As the investigation progressed, prosecutors concluded that Promes didn't just finance the shipments, he helped move them, facilitated access, coordinated steps. The Amsterdam District Court later wrote it plainly. He was directly involved with the shipments. After his conviction, Dutch prosecutors seized 9 properties across Amsterdam, Utrecht, Almere and Abcoude. Investigators linked his fashion label, Mask QP, to narcotics money. The Amsterdam Public Prosecution Office also noted Promes was reportedly living in luxury in Dubai. From real estate to designer branding, the money left a visible trail. The messages, the surveillance, the timing, it all aligned. But when the charges finally became public, Promes denied everything. His lawyers claimed the authorities had made a mistake. That yes, the encrypted chats mentioned names and details that resembled Promes. But it was not him. Behind the screen, he stayed in Russia. A preliminary hearing was scheduled for August 11th, 2023. Promes did not appear. Not in person, not via video, nothing. His uncle, Marilio, did show up, and what he said raised more questions than it answered. He admitted some involvement, but only as a connector. Claimed he helped someone access a shed. Said he knew narcotics were involved. Said he never profited. And he made one thing very clear. He would not speak against Promes. At the time of that hearing, Marilio had already spent 9 months behind bars. Promes, meanwhile, was still playing weekly football in Russia, but Dutch prosecutors were done waiting. An Interpol red notice was issued. Promes was now an internationally wanted man. Any country that detained him could be asked to hand him over to the Netherlands. Any country except Russia, because Russia has no extradition treaty with the Dutch. He was safe for now, but the trial moved forward without him. On February 14th, 2024, the courtroom in Amsterdam delivered its verdict. Promes was not present to hear it. In his absence, he was found guilty of narcotics trafficking. The court ruled he had helped import and export hundreds of kilograms of illicit substances in 2020. The evidence was overwhelming. The sentence, 6 years in prison. Prosecutors had originally asked for 9. The court went lower, perhaps because Promes had not handled weapons or carried out threats. But the judges made one thing absolutely clear. They were not impressed by his fame. Quite the opposite. In their written judgment, the court criticised Promes not for the crime, but for what it revealed. They noted he had earned millions at Ajax, enjoyed massive public support, had a successful football career that others could only dream of, and still he chose this. This makes it even more objectionable. the court wrote, that the suspect tries to increase his wealth and possibly also prestige in certain circles through involvement in large international drug transports. He acted out of greed, not desperation. And the fall was brutal. Promes' lawyers immediately filed an appeal, just as they had after his assault conviction. He maintains his innocence to this day, but now there were 2 sentences hanging over him. 6 years for narcotics, 18 months for aggravated assault, added together 7.5 years. And Dutch prosecutors were not finished. They signalled they might seek to extend the sentence to 9 years if the appeal failed, bringing the punishment in line with their original demand. For Promes, time was running out. The courtroom verdict had been delivered, but Promes was nowhere near Amsterdam. While the Dutch judiciary stacked convictions against him, he was still pulling on his number 10 shirt, still scoring goals in Moscow. Russia had become his shelter. When Ajax transferred Promes to Spartak in early 2021, it seemed like a career reset. In reality, it became a legal shield. Russia has no extradition treaty with the Netherlands, and Promes had stepped outside the reach of the law. In Russia, the numbers kept rising. Between 2021 and 2023, Promes scored 48 goals in 100 appearances, enough to make him the most prolific foreign player in Russian Premier League history. He was a fugitive off the field. While Western players fled Russia after the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Promes stayed. Not because of loyalty, because he knew exactly what waited for him if he returned. He embraced it all. On social media, he posted in Russian. In one music video, he waved the Russian flag. In another, he flashed a diamond-encrusted necklace bearing the word mask, his alter ego. A reference not just to his brand, but to the double life he was living. The Dutch press labelled him a fugitive, but in Moscow, he was still a hero. Spartak fans filled comment sections with fire emojis and highlight clips. Even the club's official account got involved. After a stunning goal in March 2021, they posted a video with the caption, "To all Promes haters, this is for you." But those numbers told only one story. Off the pitch, he was a convicted felon, protected not by innocence, but by geography. Russia didn't redeem him, it hid him. Spartak's winter training camp was scheduled in the United Arab Emirates, a seemingly routine trip, but the UAE does have an extradition treaty with the Netherlands, and Promes went anyway. It remains unknown whether he thought it would go unnoticed or believed he could slip in and out quietly. But the Dutch authorities noticed, and they acted. UAE authorities were alerted. Promes was now more than a fugitive. He was an active international target. Around March 13th, 2024, as Spartak's training camp wrapped up, Promes headed toward the airport. He did not make it onto the plane. Dubai police arrested him on the spot. The Dutch had finally made contact. The news made global headlines. A high-profile athlete, a criminal conviction, and now arrested abroad. But the story took another turn. Promes was not immediately extradited. UAE officials revealed he was under investigation for a local matter, a suspected hit-and-run traffic incident. This gave them a reason to delay, a reason to keep him on their terms. Behind the scenes, Russian officials pushed hard. According to The Independent, diplomatic pressure was quietly applied to get Promes released, or at the very least, to stop him from being sent to the Netherlands. He was held briefly in custody, then released on bond, while the UAE's traffic case moved forward. He was ordered to stay in the country. His passport was taken. Still, Promes was unfazed. On Instagram, he commented on posts about his arrest, with a blue cap emoji, slang for lies. His reaction showed mockery, not denial. But the walls were closing in. Spartak Moscow could no longer ignore the situation. With his return to Russia blocked and his future uncertain, the club finally let him go. In July 2024, Spartak terminated his contract, citing personal reasons preventing his return. After nearly 3 years of protection, the partnership was over. The fall from grace had become impossible to contain. Promes, now clubless and grounded in Dubai, seemed finished. But once again, he found a way to stay on the pitch. In September 2024, a second division team in the UAE, Dubai United FC, posted a teaser video. A silhouetted figure, a high-profile signing. Days later, they confirmed the rumours. Promes had signed a 1-year deal. Even with 2 convictions and an open extradition request, he returned to football. And not just symbolically, he scored 14 goals in 20 appearances for Dubai United during the 2024-25 season. But the story had turned surreal. A convicted trafficker, still playing matches, still posting photos with Dubai's skyline in the background, still dodging the consequences, all while Dutch prosecutors waited. That wait would soon end. By mid-2025, his contract expired. Whatever informal protection came with club status was gone. He was no longer an athlete under contract. He was now a wanted man, stuck in the wrong place. June 20th, 2025. After nearly 4 years on the run, Promes was extradited from the United Arab Emirates to the Netherlands. The Dutch Public Prosecution Service confirmed his arrival. There were no cameras, no press conference, just confirmation that Promes had landed and would now begin serving his prison term. Dutch media reported that he was handed over on a Friday. He was taken into custody immediately. His combined sentence, 7.5 years, was waiting. His legal team filed appeals. Those appeals are still pending. But for now, Promes is behind bars, 33 years old. A career in ruins, a name now etched in the courts instead of score sheets. From national hero to international fugitive. From stadium chants to cell doors. And yet, for all that has unfolded, this story is still not over. Promes once stood on the edge of greatness. 50 international caps, over 100 club goals, trophies in multiple countries. At one point, clubs like Liverpool and Arsenal circled his name. Now, that same name is printed on court documents, attached to 1,360 kilograms of coke, stamped with a 6-year prison sentence, etched into Dutch criminal records. The fall was sharp and absolute. After his 2021 arrest, the Dutch national team erased him. He never wore the orange jersey again. Ajax cut ties. European clubs stayed away. His highlights were replaced with headlines. His market value collapsed, and his reputation radioactive. Memphis Depay said it best. The Quincy Promes you read about is not the Quincy Promes I know. But the headlines didn't care. Neither did public opinion. In the Netherlands, people watched the courts move slowly, while Promes played freely abroad. It felt like an insult. Even former teammates visiting him, like Hakim Ziyech in Moscow, faced backlash, accused of siding with a criminal. Time is the one thing football never gives back. One season missed and you're replaced. One mistake made and it echoes forever. Quincy Promes didn't just lose minutes on the clock. He lost years. Years he once filled with goals, trophies and stadium lights. He played for the biggest clubs, scored on the international stage. His name was once a headline of promise. Now it's a case number, a sentencing document, a cautionary tale. He didn't fade out. He crashed, and not because the game caught up with him, but because he ran straight past it, chasing something else, something more ... Now all that's left is time, but not the kind that wins matches. The kind that counts down behind bars with no roar from the crowd, just the sound of everything he gave up.